hopefully we need to start addressing it from a non-opiate prescribing culture.
You know, and I tried to get sober for years and years and years before I actually went to treatment.
Your passion and tenacity and fire were absolutely contagious. All right, welcome to Recovery Soapbox, brought to you by Brighton Recovery Center. Today's Women in Recovery episode we are super excited about. Our guest today is Jo McMillen, with myself, the host Alisa Wood, and co-host Lacey Garcia.
Hello.
Super excited for today's episode. Thank you to our listeners out there. If you like what you hear or see, just remember you can download and subscribe to Recovery Soapbox on Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes. So thank you for the time. We hope our goal with Recovery Soapbox and intention is carrying a positive, hope-filled message for recovery. Having recovery-based conversations with proud people in recovery. So we hope today that there's something you resonate with and connect to in the conversation, and hopefully something you can take away. So with that, we'll just dive right in. Again, my name is Alisa. I am a proud woman in long-term recovery. My sobriety date is March 12th of 2006. Super grateful for that. And
Me?
Yes, over to you.
I'm Lacey. I am also a woman in recovery, and I'm very grateful to be here with Alisa and Mary Jo. My sobriety date is March 17th, 2012, and I'm just glad you're here.
It's exciting.
You. I know.
It's
I'm
really
excited to have
exciting.
you.
I'm like, recovery podcasts by, and you guys, you're good. I'm like your peers, your peer podcasters, recovery peer podcasters.
I like that. Okay.
Don't you like that? I think it's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
It's really
It
good.
is.
It's really exciting to watch. So
It is. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
And with that being said, Mary Jo, I am absolutely so just humbled and grateful to be sitting here with you and Lacey. Both of you are very active, very strong ambassadors in the recovery community. Mary Jo, I think back to several years ago, 2009, when I first met you as my practicum supervisor, when I was just starting in this field, and your passion and tenacity and fire were absolutely contagious. And maybe even without you knowing it, you were absolutely one of my first mentors. And I am just so grateful to be having this opportunity with you and interviewing you. And I'm just way excited to see where this goes.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
You're a woman who shares over 30 years in this field and have absolutely done so much for the community on legislative levels, on community levels, on personal levels. And so just thank you for taking the time, and I'm so excited to see where this goes.
Well, thank you. That's an honor. I think just saying, just knowing that was a connection for you with, some piece of mentoring that occurred, in a program that, we were logistically, working in together. And because I think one of the things that recovery does for me is personal connection. I really don't know that recovery happens without personal connection. And
Absolutely.
So whether it's in treatment or in the community or in individual sponsorship or one-to-one conversation, I feel like I've had such tremendous benefit from getting to be part of a community where I get to connect with people. And fortunately, I'm a people person, but I'm fascinated and truly excited when I get to talk to people and see their kind of light come on. Their successes happen. It energizes me to no end to see somebody really find their own passion and find their own light. I just so in a practicum situation, watching people just try out their skills as a counselor, or in what I do now, working with peers. It's they have these epiphanies of making a difference, or being able to be a part of some connection that happens with an individual who might be struggling, and then start to see their own light. It's a beautiful thing. It really is.
It is a beautiful thing.
I was thinking this morning about the podcast, and I was thinking, so 31 and a half years, huh? Because I started my recovery journey when I was 24.
Yeah.
So, so I'm looking at, this year, I'm 55, I'll be 56. And I'm really happy about that. I like being in my 50s. And yet I see younger women and younger people, and some of my older friends who have been part of my recovery, I've had those losses, people who have passed in long-term recovery.
Yeah.
But so I'm getting older, I'm getting wiser. That's the benefit.
Right?
Yeah.
Learning from the experiences.
Yeah, that's really it. So, but so I think in sharing a little bit about where I came from, is I was I ended up going into treatment at the age of 24. And I had an epiphany on my 24th birthday. I don't know if it was an epiphany or a crisis. I think both. That I remember, I think, well, to think about how people, when is that catalyst from having being in active addiction to stepping into recovery? When does that happen? I still don't know the answer. In 30 years of my own personal recovery, 31 and a half years, my recovery date, as I call it now, in other rooms, I call it my sobriety date, is September 16th, 1985. Today's the 16th, so it's kind of an auspicious number for me, because I really relate to that. And so when I went into treatment, I went out of having no way to kind of cope with what was going on in my life at that time. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I left there at age 21. I probably would say that was my first geographic move to want to change something about what was going on the inside of me. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. My mom and dad are still alive, and so are my siblings. And we grew up, I think in a relatively mid-class suburban neighborhood. My siblings and I were all pretty close together, except for the youngest, who's 9 years younger than me. My parents were together until I was 21, but it had a rocky marriage over time. And I think, what was going on, my parents were coming out of the 60s, where they were trying to kind of, figure out, how to raise kids, how to have, the financial means to raise a family, how to have a marriage that worked. And I think it was pretty challenging. There was a lot of stuff kind of happening, and I won't go into the details of our family dysfunction, because that's a long story that probably, only helps me understand where I came from. But alcoholism is in my family. Really, my dad was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. My mom, both of her parents were alcoholics. And it didn't seem to be a lot of chaos and drama from their alcoholism in their family. A little bit more in mine, probably mainly because of just, how do you raise a family and how do you have a marriage? I think that's probably, a learning experience. Like I said, I'm older today, I'm wiser, and I can tell you from my own experience how that happens. But drinking and marijuana came into my life as a teenager. My parents drank. They didn't smoke marijuana, but certainly introduced among the peers that I hung around. And I liked it. I liked it right away. I was intensely curious about drinking. And that started, I would say, at about 14 or 15, somewhere in that experimental stage, which we know happens oftentimes for adolescents. But by the time I got to high school, regular use, I'd smoke marijuana every day before I went to classes in high school. Drinking on the weekends, probably not during the week, but, we grew up in Ohio, and, you got kegers and parties and a good time. And that was the fun part of substance use, which I think people do experience. They experience that letting go and that, kind of less inhibition. And so that, that occurred. And only looking back in hindsight, do I really recognize my own anxiety during those adolescent years, and kind of with knowing what I know about my family and relationships, am I able to put pieces together? But
Well, and I even personally relate to that aspect so much. And what you just said, and, only in hindsight. And of course, at the time, I didn't understand even my own feelings and my own emotions and all of the chaos going on within the family. But there was that initial relief and fun and, and the party aspect that came from using substances and drinking at a young age. And only through recovery and then years later in retrospect do we, is it more healing to start to kind of put those pieces together.
Yeah, that's right. That's really it. In fact, nobody really even had much information about alcohol and drugs being a serious problem in our family. Actually, the first kind of notion of anything was my parents being concerned about my eating disorder. So I really came into recovery through an eating disorder. And I started bulimia right around the time of 16, 17. And my sister was also doing bulimia. And it was interesting because we were trying to catch each other, and it was one of those things that's where I think chaos really started, and, and of course we were both, my sister's a year and a half younger than I am. And then my brother a year and a half younger than her. So he was just starting to come onto it a little bit. But by the time we were in, I got to the end of high school, my brother and sister were in high school. So we were partiers. We all smoked marijuana. I remember finding a note one time that my brother gave me, and it said, "Mary Jo, I'm sorry you had a fight with your boyfriend. I left you a couple joints so that you could relax and feel better." Now, is that not telling?
Coping.
Is that not telling? And we had no idea.
Absolutely.
It was just like, hey, man, chill out.
Yeah, here's how to cope.
Here's how to cope.
That's it.
Yeah. Well,
what a sweet gesture, I thought.
And it was
when
sweet
I found
gesture,
that note.
and that was him supporting.
Yeah, that's right.
And being supportive.
right.
And here you go.
Yeah.
We'll get through this. Just smoke
he was
a couple
16,
joints. Yeah.
and I have to say, some of the chaos in our family too was me being the older sibling. And also, I horribly regretfully, was even, I'd say abusive from what I know now, punching on my brother and sister, or being, verbally, assaulting to them, which to this day, breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Of course, I've made those amends, mostly because I'm a loving sister who adores them, and truly said I was sorry for those times.
Yeah.
But, So, I actually I left Cincinnati when I was 21 years old. My parents were divorcing, and I'm like, my boyfriend had moved to Texas. And so I said, who I'd partied with and a lot. And, I was, intending to, go be with the love of my life. And so I left Cincinnati, Ohio, and moved to Houston, Texas. Talk about a culture shock. I was this girl from a small suburban town. It's called Finneytown is where I went to high school. And Finneytown was just like, keggers and partying and your friends. And so I went to this mecca of a city where also now I was, old enough to drink, 21, going to bars, discos. I did disco. I thought I could disco. But if you're drinking, you can disco, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
So, so really things started to accelerate with my alcoholism. I was still smoking marijuana and alcoholism, but also then there started to be, and of course I think all along had been caffeine pills and speed. So I'd had that was not my drug of addiction. I more liked marijuana, alcohol, and downers because I felt anxious knowing what I know now. Speed was the weight control for the eating disorder. Not conscious of all that formula going on with addiction, but that's really what it was. It was a formula, for coping, which turned out to be very serious addiction issues. So it wasn't until I was 24 when things really started to fall apart. I felt like I hated myself. I think that was probably the biggest issue is I really didn't like who I was, and no matter if somebody said, well, you're beautiful. I had the whole Farrah Fawcett hairdo going on with the feathering and the eyeshadow and the really great pantsuit that I would wear out to disco, and the attention that you would get from people. I mean, that rewarded my self-esteem, so I had all that going on, yet at night, in the morning, wherever I was, it just didn't ever feel okay. I just never felt very good. And so there's a lot of things that I could say, why that happened. But the masking, of course, had already been engaged, which is substance use. So I hit a bottom. I hit a bottom at 24. I weighed 90 pounds. I was not in the relationship I wanted to be. I was hanging out with somebody who I could easily get my drugs from, and when I could, running off to the bar, for a little bit of relief and attention. And at that point, too, my sister moved to Texas. So I remember some events that occurred that said, I'm not happy, and this is awful. I need to do something. And I had talked to my mom and my dad at one point, and they had introduced me to the idea of going to treatment. And I was like, I don't even really remember how I responded. However, the brochure and the treatment, I was in Texas, the treatment that they wanted to send me to was an eating disorder treatment program. Because at this point, I have to tell you, I didn't really realize I had a substance use problem. So I had the eating disorder. Right. And the treatment program was in Florida. The brochure was enticing because it was by the ocean. It looked like a resort. Right. And I thought, I need a little getaway. My life is pretty messed up here, and I need a time out.
Right. Nice time out. Get a little beach time, sun.
It's totally what I was thinking.
Yeah,
totally what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And, so, of course, with a medical leave at work, because I was still meaning to maintain my job as a project accountant, working in a real estate for a real estate company that did leasing for office space. But I wasn't hanging on to it for much longer. I suppose things would have started to crumble. But fortunately, I had insurance. Yeah. Had a diagnosis, and I was accepted to an 8-week program. So I went to Florida, and I was introduced to recovery. Not just for an eating disorder, Yeah, they took a urine drug screen, which they do when you enter treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And they found a few different types of substances in my urine drug screen.
Mm-hmm.
Then they said, we also have a chemical dependency unit here,
Mm-hmm.
and we think we need to have you do a combined program. And that was the first time anybody said anything about my substance use being a problem.
Did you feel like it was a problem then? Or did you not know? Like at that moment when you were going to treatment?
I really didn't know. I mean, we call that denial,
Mm-hmm.
but I really didn't see it as a problem. I actually probably saw it as the solution.
Yeah.
It was the way I was coping. I knew my eating disorder was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I didn't like binging and purging. That was a hateful, shameful part of my place.
Mm-hmm.
And again, body image too. I mean, it was like, can I look cute in a skinny 2-piece bathing suit? And my weight had to be, when I was on the scale, it was if the numbers were going down and I could see a flat stomach, I was okay. I mean, that
Right.
was really how I validated my self-esteem,
Mm-hmm.
and I think using, smoking pot, drinking, taking, barbiturates, great combination, those three, right? And benzodiazepines, all lethal together. I had no idea. I mean, I was using very lethal, harmful substances, and cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
I was also freebasing. And I think it's important to say those things because I never really realized how much trouble I was in.
Right.
Because that seemed to be how I was trying to manage, the other parts of my life that I didn't like.
Right.
Yeah. And relationship stuff too. It was a mess,
Right.
and it wasn't until I got into treatment that they started to untangle the mess for me,
Mm-hmm.
Because I really don't think I didn't have any tools, obviously, to do it. So
What do you remember a point, or was that kind of a series through the course of treatment that you started realizing that the substances were also the problem?
Oh, yeah. It actually really happened for me in 12-step meetings.
Yeah.
It really did. They would take us, they had meetings at the center that I was in, and it happened in outside meetings. And because I was in the primary program for eating disorder, they were kind of having you relate to your eating disorder through the 12 steps.
Mm-hmm.
But I related more to talking about the powerlessness over my substance use,
Yeah.
and my eating disorder too. But I really started to see those things. So I started to feel something.
Yeah.
It was a sense of probably serenity is what I would know it to be now, and a sense of not being isolated anymore among the people in the treatment community as well as in the meetings. And I was attracted to this one meeting particularly. They'd come into the center and they would have a speaker meeting, and then they would have this 12-step, 12 traditions meeting in this smaller room. And it was a bunch of old guys, long timers in the program. And they would read a passage out of it and talk. It spoke to me. It's where I started to hear something. I can't even tell you that I really remember because, in treatment, you're trying to kind of get the concepts of what, especially because it was a 12-step model, what these steps mean in my relationship to my life. And I didn't really know. I mean, I was brand new. I was like trying to figure it out. Big Book did not make sense to me, but it was somebody starting to talk about there being a way that they changed. And, like I said, I just didn't have a remedy yet. And it seemed like they were starting to talk about one. And I knew, and the only thing that I think why it worked is I didn't want to go backwards.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave that program and go home to the way things had been.
Right.
It was just didn't want to go back there. So, but I would say 12-step.
Yeah.
That was kind of that, and not even understanding it, but just feeling a sense of connection and possibility of something being able to change.
Yeah.
I agree. I think for me, the 12 steps, when I got sober, I went to treatment too, and they took me to 12-step meetings, and I had never been to one. And I tried to get sober for years and years and years before I actually went to treatment. And I wouldn't go to 12-step meetings. I thought they were weird and, that they wouldn't work for me. And so for a while when I started...
Cult, or they were...
There was something
there was something about it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's how I felt initially.
They have their own culture, and it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah. But I remember, going and I would pick them apart and, I am worse than them, or they're worse than me, or I would never do that, or I'm this and that, and I would just pick them apart. And the very, one of the very first meetings that I went to, if not the first one, it was a closed meeting, and this, old timer got up and said something that you hear in meetings all the time. The good news is there's a solution, and the bad news is we're it. And I remember just thinking, like, how am I ever going to be able to do this?
Wow.
If this is what I have to look forward to. I was 26 years old, and you were 24.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But I kept going, and somewhere along the lines, it's like what you talked about. Like, I started to relate to the similarities, and like, the hope and wanting a better quality of life and all of the things that, I look at now. But I knew that these people were happy, and that they had friends, and something was going on there, and I wanted it. I just didn't know what it was yet.
Right.
Like like I didn't know how it worked. I couldn't wrap my head around, follow these things and this will happen. And, it didn't make sense, but so
it's
I
not
related
clear.
to that. No.
I mean, even though they said the steps are done in this way, there's still not the clarity
Right.
about what will all this mean, and do you remember asking, but why?
Uh-huh.
I remember the why. And I do remember a sponsor who I got said, asking why, you're looking for a definitive answer that it really is what I know now. It's a process. It's not an answer to a why. It's really a process of insight that happens over time.
Yeah. And I can so relate to what both of you are sharing also. I mean, I remember being, I was 19 when I came crawling.
Wow.
And I say crawling because I was, I felt like just a shell of a human being, Mary Jo, something you said, that through going to meetings and starting to hear the solution, like there was something about starting to not feel alone anymore. Because I so remember, and I know for me, I don't ever want to forget what that feels like to feel alone, surrounded by people, and to feel so isolated and just within myself, that feeling like no one on the face of the earth could understand what I was thinking or feeling or any of that, and just continuing to suit up and show up, so to say, and seeing that other people had this light in their eyes. I knew that there was something there. And I was one of those too that wanted like the definitive answer, right? Give me like A, B, and C, and I will do it. I just don't want to feel this hell that I'm feeling. Because I had been putting substances in my body for so long, even the thought of not having something was terrifying. And I didn't know how to do it. But just hearing, how people like were holding jobs and showing up to life and doing all of these things that were still pretty inconceivable for me. Like somewhere along the way, it was just, I guess, seeds that were planted, like I also can't really pinpoint, that moment, that was it. For me, there were lots of moments, lots of aha moments, and it is absolutely the process,
right?
I can relate to.
It seems like it's that it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that, I'm even, I was one of those people that I went to meetings, did the 90 meetings in 90 days and then some. I probably for the first 5 years went to an average of 6 meetings a week. Yeah. And I would say I went to treatment for 60 days. They wanted me to stay longer. I thought I was done. So at that point, but I would say what I did do is I went back to meetings when I returned home. And I was living with my sister who was still using. And that had some challenges. But I was out of treatment a month, so I was at 90 days in recovery. And the man that I had dated for 3.5 years, who I was not seeing at the time, but had some notion that I would help him get into recovery, and we would rekindle our love, and it would all be good, was ended when he overdosed and died from a cocaine-related incident, heart attack. And at that point, I would say that was my first real epiphany. Outside of treatment was, wow, two things. He died. I might have been the person because I had brought him cocaine before. So it might have been me who would have given him the drugs, or maybe shared with him the cocaine where he would have resulted in a death. And then the other part was, and this was a man who knew I was crazy and I was chaotic and needed me to not be around him. He gave me the money to go to treatment. He gave me the deposit that I needed. So in some ways, I of course had that gratitude that he helped me find help. He knew I was suffering, helped me find help. He didn't know he was suffering, and then it ultimately took his life, but I think in some ways his death was my shot at saying, I don't want it to end in this. And so I'm one of those people that remained drug-free and sober from that moment on, from my treatment experience on. Probably, I would say, mostly because of that tragedy. I don't think it was anything that I did right, even my 90 meetings in 90 days and all that thing that I was doing right. It was really that tragic loss that made it so real for me. I thought, I take this seriously. I take the consequences of addiction seriously. And and I just continued on recovery. But I will tell you, meetings were a way for me to find somebody to give me attention.
Same.
It happens, right? There's somebody in there who's going to think I'm really cute, and he did. And he happened to be from Utah. And that's how I wound up from Texas to Utah at a year sober. And I remember this little lady in a meeting saying, relationships in that first year of recovery are not a good idea. And I just thought I was different. Like all of us do. I'm capable. I have a new program now. He's in the program. I'm in the program. We're going to be fine. And
I know better.
I can make this work.
I will make it work.
I can make it work. And you know what? I really tried. I really did try. I left Texas. I moved here. My story is that I knew him 2 weekends and 1 month in the middle. And we got married. Mainly because he was a person who was from a Mormon family. I was not going to be a Mormon or in the LDS faith. He wasn't either. But he, for whatever reasons, wanted to get married instead of living together. And discussed it with my sponsor, and she said, do you love him? Then why don't you get married? So that lasted 2.5 years. And the more I started to, I went to my meetings and I went to recovery, and he didn't. He struggled with a mental health issue. He was bipolar. And it was challenging because I said, we'll get through this. But it turned out to be not what his path was. But I continued to find myself in the rooms of recovery with the people that supported me going through now in a new place, a divorce, at 26. It's more like 28 by that time. So, you can get divorced and stay sober.
Yep.
You can get married. You can get married. You can suffer a death, sober. Get married, and get divorced to stay sober. And it didn't take very long before I found somebody else. I like my relationships, and managed to be with my. He was a friend. He's my husband as of 26 years, 91, 26 years this year. So he was in recovery. I was in recovery. And it took a lot of work for us to be married 26 years. And we're both still in long-term recovery from addiction. And we have grown children now. So, that's the good stuff. it's the hard stuff,
but
it's the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, our daughters are 26 and no, 20, not 26, sorry. Our daughters are 23 and 20, you know, and it's
Wow.
odd because my oldest is going to be 24 at the end of the year, the same age that I got sober. And hers is a much different journey.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thrilled to say.
Yeah. In a different place.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah.
And one point that you just touched on that that also resonates with my story is I initially thought that if I just stopped using, that would fix everything. After, of course, coming to terms that I am an addict and accepting powerlessness and all of that, then I thought, well, okay, if I just accept that, then everything else should just fall into place, right? And it took years coming to an awareness and understanding that was the drugs and the alcohol were the symptom for me. They were the solution. And even years into my journey, then it became relationships that I looked to, you know, to validate or to feel me or to make me feel okay and whole, or shopping or exercise, or, you know, it can take on so many different aspects. And for me, it wasn't until probably about 7 or 8 years into my journey and into my recovery that I really got to that place of being fully and authentically comfortable in my own skin without a relationship. And so I think that I just know for myself, like that's, as women in recovery, I think those are important pieces to touch on and to support each other in. Just that process of continuing to uncover those layers. And for me, it became more and more about the emotional recovery and
Very
healing,
much, right?
The farther into my journey, and still is.
Right.
You know, I at no point do I want to say, "Yep, I'm done," because it just continues to evolve and grow and change.
You know, the thing that you touched on about, you know, relationships and, you know, that emotional recovery. I have to say that, you know, I went from relationship to relationship, but, you know, of course, when I, you know, started my relationship with my husband, Sean, something that became key for me was my relationship with other women.
Yeah.
You know, I really started to, you know, have a woman, you know, I had women sponsor and friends that I have, you know, my friends, I have friends that are 30 years. We've been together in recovery for 30 years. Yeah. And those women have been my backbone of emotional sobriety, right, to have my relationships with my women friends, you know, and
Absolutely.
So I would say that's where my emotional recovery came from.
Yeah.
And therapy.
Yeah.
I was in therapy for over 20 years.
Yeah.
That really helped me with the challenges of the relationship
Yep.
that I had, not
Yep.
so much just with my husband, but the one with me, and
Yeah.
how I behaved, reacted,
Right.
stood up for myself, you know, shut my mouth.
Communicated.
That would be a better way to put
Yep,
it, right?
yep.
Yeah. Those things. Know when to not say something. Know when I needed to say something.
Pick your battles.
Pick my battles.
Fun.
Right. I learned a lot in therapy. That's it.
Pick your battles.
That's it. That's the one.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm tenacious. You know, so is my husband. You know, we both have to be right. You know how to do
Yep.
that. You know,
That
and then
can
there's
be an
raising
interesting
kids.
mix sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, but the women really brought a tremendous amount of value to my emotional sobriety and learning to love myself.
Absolutely.
It really did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And what you just ended with, you know, that journey of learning to love myself, that continues to ring more and more true for me. And absolutely, like, I could not do it without the women in my life. In recovery and even through some other avenues,
Right.
and other means of healing and
Exactly.
that I've sought out as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think, especially having, when you're introduced to recovery, it's 12-step. But for me, even though I continue to go to my 12-step meetings, I had to find other ways to enhance primarily my spiritual life.
Yeah.
My emotional and my spiritual life really had to be, bigger. And it's really big now. I don't even know how I could describe it in some ways, because my faith and my connection to, how my spirit, finds peace, is really big, and higher power, is not so definitive for me today.
Right.
But I can tell you, the different experiences that I have.
Right.
So, yeah, but it didn't all happen in the rooms of recovery.
Right.
It did. I did find it outside in some other ways.
And that was my next question, because even at like where I'm at 5 years, like I feel like myself like exploring different things, different avenues, and my spirituality and like all of these different things. So have you done that like multiple times through this 31 years?
Yes, I have.
This is me swimming.
Yeah, no,
Just
you're
keep
exactly right.
swimming,
No, it is.
just keep swimming.
It
I love it,
evolves and
though.
it changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think really at 5 years, which is right when I was going through my divorce, so I kind of done things status quo, until I discovered more about me. And it wasn't, but at 5 years, some things started to shift and change, because you really have some established recovery at that point.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, so, recovery, just staying sober and not using was a cornerstone. But then what? Where does my life evolve? What are the things that enrich it? For me, I wanted to be a parent. That was if I was going to do anything, I didn't even know what I wanted to really do for a career, but I knew I wanted to be a mom. So that's what I did at 9 years sober. Let me tell you. It was like being in early recovery again, because I had to learn how to do things now differently on a whole other emotional level, relating with, my husband and how we raised the, girls, and, my emotional, challenges. But I had to find other things. And so, I can tell you I've changed at different intervals. 5 years was probably the first key, and then, but I would tell you, it gets exciting. I think it's so open. It is such a journey. And if I were to say anything, it's like, be curious about your journey, because there's so much possibility. That's what I'd say. It's possibility. You get to kind of create the life that you are conscious of now. Because I think that's what recovery is, and sobriety is about, is I get to be conscious. I'm no longer impaired. So sometimes it really hurts. Sometimes I'm screaming in my car where nobody can hear me, really feel like I'm losing it. And then I kind of quickly take what we call our inventory. I kind of evaluate, okay, you're a little dramatic, or a lot. And I pull myself back in and find a way to comfort myself, whether it's calling another woman, or it's saying some prayers, or it's going for a run, exercising, sometimes it was crying myself to sleep, but out of all those challenges and fun, loving, wonderful things, it evolves. So 5 years. I mean, when you said that, I was like, wow, that's cool. I mean, I think that's really cool. And I wouldn't say I wouldn't want to go back there. I think I learned so much from that place.
Yeah.
It was a rich time, even though it was a really difficult time for me.
And I feel both of that right now, like the difficult and the like exciting, and the like wanting to shift, and it's just, I feel deeply indifferent than I have in a while, and I don't know what it is, but we'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where the curiosity comes in.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but boy, it's something.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that transition and growth will come out of that place. And I can't say, looking back at, for, the 30 years, it's like I can't say that there was one place that was more valuable than the other.
Yeah.
Really.
Just different. And that even makes me reflect on, where I was at 5 years. And for me also, that was a very introspective that's really where I started to dive into the emotional recovery, more so that I was talking about, which I remember being overwhelming and kind of scary. And there was even this part of me that was like, but I don't want to do any more work. I've done that already. But then when, you can kind of settle in and just come to accept that there is no destination, that it really then becomes about the journey. And just getting to know myself more and more. Not who I thought I was, but who I am. And just diving into that and connecting with that. There have been multiple points throughout my journey that just grows deeper and deeper and takes different directions.
Yeah.
And now, like, it's less and less scary and more exciting to just kind of like settle in and embrace it and different levels.
Yeah. And I think it's always, like looking back at right in the first 6 months of sobriety, opening up mail and paying bills and doing things like that felt overwhelming and scary at that point, like making a doctor's appointment or, getting a car and getting my license back, like that stuff felt overwhelming and scary. And then it's always something. It's just on different levels.
Definitely.
So
I call them milestones now, even, as, because, at 2 years, I became a treatment counselor. I went to do the drug and alcohol counseling course at the University of Utah. I didn't pursue an advanced degree because I was in a hurry to have a work life and children. And so, but my career became in counseling and drug and alcohol treatment.
Yeah.
And that changed for me about 7 years ago when I, started to learn about more about the new recovery movement and building a recovery community organization, which really kind of relit my passion for people in recovery.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about treatment and treating the illness of addiction, because the illness of addiction is so severe. It's really so severe. I mean, we're seeing this now, right, in our state of Utah community and our nation.
Yeah.
People are really suffering horrible, illnesses very fast. Of course we know with opiate addiction, but as my addiction wasn't with opiates, but it was. So I actually, my physical dependence wasn't as severe, but we're seeing that in such a fast and serious way, really how to address that to help somebody find recovery.
Yeah.
And my philosophy is never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up working on yourself to find how you can be in recovery, whatever pathway that is.
Right.
It's really changed, because for some people, like, we're saying, where do you explore your recovery at 5 years? And maybe for some people it's early on. Where do they find that?
Yeah.
Where do you connect? I think that's what recovery is. Where do I connect so that I can be healthy?
Yeah.
So I can be well.
Yep.
So that I can arrest that dark side of where I was trapped in addiction.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people it looks different. And I went to a conference last year in Connecticut, and it was the the multiple pathways of recovery conference.
Right.
And I got to see all of these different things. And
you're going again this year too. Awesome.
Yeah.
So awesome.
It's in Florida this year.
Yeah. I think I'm going to try to go.
You should.
I'm going to try to go.
Yeah. We can lay out in the sun
I'm
together.
for it.
I want to go.
Hey,
Come.
I want to hear about
Florida in
this.
that's close to where I went to
do
treat.
it.
We'll probably
Okay.
find the same
Okay.
beach. I might not remember it, but I would probably find
Girls
it.
trip.
Yeah. But it's about connecting with something.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's, whether it be, AA or, FTR or something at USARA or, yoga. I mean, just anything. Because at least for me, when I was using, I was so disconnected from the outside world.
Yeah.
I just felt like, I kind of talked about this in the last podcast, but just like everything was going on around me, and I was just so completely disconnected from it. And even the people that I, had some communication with, I was just so very disconnected from them and their feelings. And so I agree. I think connection is the piece.
Even from ourselves, which for me was the hardest one to connect to, or to start to connect to. But it's all those different levels of connection. Just connecting like we are here now, and or one-on-one levels, or community levels, or there's so many different avenues.
You got to keep trying them out, because what works for me, how I support my self-care, right? That's what it is, and how I decompress, and what I used to do is different. I used to do aerobics. I did aerobics for a long time. Remember the high-impact aerobics?
That was like the big thing back in the day.
It was. And I did ferocious aerobics. Yeah. I was doing the high-impact, and especially when I was pissed off. I would be throwing punches as you would be doing the, isometrics, because I was punching air, because, in sobriety, I've had to deal with my angry feelings. I can remember first saying, I don't have anger. Oh my God, I'm pissed off, And in fact, not only can get angry, I kind of like it sometimes, and I kind of like the energy it gives me. It's not helpful for me, so I have to learn how to do that. I started yoga about 15 years ago. It's a much better way for me. Yeah, I can't do the high impact like I used to anymore. And I did running. I would run a lot, and I love FTR. I love the movement of recovery, exercise and recovery. We've got FTR, an addict to athlete, here in Utah, doing really community exercising together, helping support each other. I love seeing that. It really has been this energizing movement. There's so many opportunities and ways that you can connect into what you do for recovery. It's really a lot of fun.
I think that just made me think. Remember when we came to USARA, like before FTR was anything, and we came and Ian said, "I want to start a run group," and you had this like dumb little flyer.
I do.
And you just said, "Okay,
sure,
it's going to be hard, but
come on in. Let's do. Sure, you can have this space."
Yep.
And now you've got.
And there was like 3 people that would show up to the Monday night run group.
Well, I remember because being a person who's addicted to work, I would leave late. You guys would start. I'd leave, and just as I was leaving, the run group would be there. You'd meet. And then. You'd leave, and then I'd be leaving when you'd come back. Yeah. And you would do your route in the neighborhood when we were out in Midvale, and that was cool. And speaking of where that started, you and Ian and the community that started out of that, just that small run group. And that was Sugar House Park, and now it's the gym. And now this wonderful community. It's thrilling, and all along, you can see the stress of, trying to get, your organization off the ground, but it's about, the organization developed out of that peer support, supporting each other, so there's the possibility and
the connection.
And the connection. It's become this phenomenal entity that people really have another option for recovery. Right. So that's exciting to me. That is just, our Utah community is awesome. Recovery is really doing. It really is. And it's a service. You guys do a lot of service work.
We do a lot of service, but it's people like you that have supported, from the beginning, the very beginning. You were a huge support from the very beginning when it was the 3 people, and you believed in.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to watch it have blossomed and become such a wonderful success, because it also came out of, I think, it came out of that. And that's where that's where I really like this recovery movement in the peer-to-peer support, because it's a process. There's not a clear path really, right?
No.
It's not like, okay, here's the policies and procedures for us to develop this recovery community organization or movement or community. And it really came out of people creating it. And that's really, so what we do now at USARA is a recovery community organization, and we have a recovery community center. And some, I'll hear people say, well, why can't we have one in, another part of the state? And it's like, you can, but it's like FTR. It takes the fire of a community and the people in it to really build it, and, it's like not being territorial. Like, oh, well, this is what we do here. I don't know about you doing that here. It doesn't. It's communal. It's like we partner together to really help people find where they fit. And that's what's been so exciting, and I love that. So that multiple pathways that you talked about in the conference that you're going to, that's evolving, and it has to. It has to, because we don't have. We have so many people who are looking for hope and. A path of recovery, but they may not even call it recovery, the same way I do. But they want to have that way that they can change and have a better life. Yeah, really, it's just about a better life, And because what I look at now, it's like, how do you feel about being 31 and a half years, in recovery? And it's like, well, it's a way of life. I'm not in my addiction, and my life isn't based on my addiction. It's based on my living. And I've got my tantrums. I had one 10 minutes before I left the office, And I said, you're bugging me right now. I can't talk, and I work with peers, and they all get to say how they feel. It can be kind of chaotic and a long process, but I have to tell you, it's a beautiful thing.
It is. Because
everybody gets to really have input. And, I love that.
And to be part of.
Yeah.
I remember that, that sense of, like we've been talking about a lot, that sense of connection and finally feeling like I belonged.
Yeah.
And just that sense of home with my peers in meetings, in fellowship, and feeling like I was a participating member of life and society. And it can take on so many facets and avenues. And I do believe, there's that saying, it takes the village to raise one of us. And it really does. And it's so cool to even just sit back and watch this movement and all of these aspects, FTR and USARA and just all of these different avenues. And yet we can all come together for a common connection also. It's just beautiful to watch.
USARA and the Recovery Community Organization really came out of the inspiration from Faces and Voices of Recovery, which is a national organization that started with some grants that were given to us by federal dollars well over 15 years ago now, maybe even closer to 20. And as and what happened in that recovery movement that was inspired, with some literature and writings by a man by the name of William White, really took kind of maybe what we saw in the LGBTQ movement was, and especially when they were suffering from loss from HIV and AIDS. They said, listen, we're going to stand up for ourselves, and we have rights, and we need care. We need health care. And I think that's, but that is what's happened in this movement with Faces and Voices of Recovery. And right now, there's well over 100 recovery community organizations that are collaborating with treatment programs in their community with, the people, family members, right? Family members, there's 12-step Al-Anon for family members, but family members are in a crisis. They have loved ones who are being, held hostage by addiction, And I say held hostage by addiction because once substance use becomes addiction, that person no longer has a choice.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And the family doesn't have a choice. So everybody's freaking powerless.
Yeah.
So you just look at, and as a community member, I feel powerless over addiction now. You know, it's how do we stop this thing? But I believe we have some power, which is our voice and our stories of recovery, which we're going to keep telling. We're going to keep celebrating. And, you know, I like to share this. A dear friend of mine, you know, Darlene, is somebody who lost her son 4 years ago to a heroin overdose after he had some, I think, 50 days of recovery. Wow. Either 50 or 150. So it was the first incidence of use on a day that he, you know, was struggling, you know, not intending to die. Right. But that's what happened, you know, and she, you know, she has this other family member, son, who found recovery, you know, in his own path. And he found another woman in recovery, and how, you know, they have they just had a baby, you know. So here's this grandmother now that gets to celebrate, this new life, you know, not forgetting kind of the tragic impact that addiction has had on their lives, but the celebration of recovery and the celebration of new life. And, you know, now this whole beautiful journey, starting with this new baby in their family, you know. And, you know, I look at those pieces because I do have to find where's the hope. Yep. Right? Where's the hope?
Yep. Well, and as you were sharing that, I was reflecting myself, and that I have to, you know, and just speaking of the tragedies as we were talking about, I even have to continually remind myself that even in the midst of those tragedies, I witness and get to be part of so many miracles on a daily basis. You know, to me, something as simple as this conversation between us three women, all of us here sharing our stories and celebrating together, that's a miracle. For me, going one day without having to put something in my body to feel okay was a miracle. And so not forgetting to celebrate those, you know, those tiny things that are easy for our mind to look over or skim past. Right. That even in the midst of the heartache and the tragedies, there are still those blessings and those gifts.
Yeah, they're awesome. You know, I mean, I know watching you get a new job. Yeah. You know, here. And, you know, watching you get a new puppy. You know. Yeah. You know, and you know, seeing you on hikes and things like that. I mean, those are fascinating things. And I have to tell you, you know, I've had great joy this last week. My youngest daughter, who's 20, just graduated college. You know, this kid is a driver. You know, she's this kid, my adorable daughter, Delaney. You know,
I know, so cute.
Finished college, you know, and she's going to be moving to France this fall. You know, those are big things that she did. Yeah. You know, what I am grateful for is that I was a parent in recovery that could have enough of my own awareness to be the best possible parent that I could be for her. Yeah. You know, my greatest asset for being a parent is I love her. I love and adore her. Sometimes we drive each other crazy, right? And sometimes we have our stuff we have to work out. But it's been wonderful. And then right after she graduated, her sister came up. You know, my other daughter, Mackenzie, you know, lives in rural Utah. You know, she lives in central Utah, in Boulder, Utah. And she cooks at a restaurant that is well known, and she gets to live her life down there, you know. So Delaney and I drove down, followed her back down there and spent a few days with her hiking around, you know. And I'm watching these two women who, and I'm going to bring it back to the one thing I really knew I wanted to do. I did know that I wanted to be a mom, you know, and I know recovery for me really brought about that dream come true. Yeah. You know, you know, 12-step refers to them as the promises. And I find my husband he said, what does he say? He says, he said, if I would have only imagined how my life would be to what I have today, I would have sold myself short.
Yeah.
You know, I would have sold myself short.
Mm-hmm.
And I even repeated myself like he does. That's funny. You know, take on those attributes of your significant other. You know, and now we're close to being empty nesters.
Mm-hmm.
So as you were saying, at 5 years, Lacey, in recovery, now I have to kind of, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
My husband says we have to remodel the bathroom. And he's right.
That's
Both
a good
bathrooms.
start.
Yeah, it's a good start, right?
Good
we were
project.
remodeling before we had kids. Now we're, you know, and when they were young, and now we're back to doing it again, which was great, you know, working on projects together, you know, and, you know, life is full. Life is really, really amazing when you're conscious.
Yeah.
And it's also really hard.
Yeah.
You know, those days that are really hard to be conscious. And that's really what sobriety is about and recovery is about.
Yeah.
And how do you find a way to do that? And I have this faith, you know, my faith really is, you know, the higher power for me is really, my faith is in humanity.
Yeah.
I really am a very humanistic person, you know, that I believe in what we do together, you know, is really powerful, you know.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, those are the gifts. Those really are, you know. And I love to hear about what other people are getting to do. I really do.
Yeah.
You know.
And celebrating in each other's milestones and
exactly.
each other's miracles. And that's cool to be
new
a part
babies.
of.
You know, I'm seeing this whole new generation now have their new relationships. You know, people are getting married
And
or they're having
and
their
having
children,
babies.
you know, and I'm watching this. You know, I have this neighbor who's called me Mama Jo ever since she was young, and I was with a woman that I sponsor, and we have been having breakfast on Saturday, and you know, I was thinking, like, you know, I get to be this Mama Jo. You know, I get to watch, you know, these lovely families, you know, start their journey, and these are recovery families because that's most of my friends. You know, watch them get to have their children. You know, it's lovely. You know, and celebrate them the way other people had celebrated me.
Yeah,
you know. So, and still do.
Absolutely.
I feel very, you know, like the two of you welcoming me here, and you know, it's a treat for me. Absolutely.
Well, it's a treat for us.
It's a treat for us. Yeah.
This is just a wonderful thing, so I'm excited to support it and get to continue to do it. And like I said, we could talk forever.
We
could
really
go on all day.
We could keep going and
we're
going.
only halfway there. No, I'm
really
teasing. I'm teasing.
Really. We got a few more hours.
We'll just stay here tonight, Melissa.
Okay.
Just sleep here.
Okay.
I don't know if there was anything else. You know, I know we had some
So I
things
wanted
to
to
talk
touch
about.
So Recovery Day.
Recovery Day.
I do want to touch on that because that for me has been something significant in my recovery. Every year I look forward to that. And kind of what is it and how do people get involved in it? And, you know, something I love about USARA is that, you know, like people can come and get involved in Pride. Like, you know, they can be on the Pride committee. They can be on the Recovery Day committee. And that's like the piece that Alisa was talking about, like feeling a part of.
Yeah.
Right.
Like little things like that make you feel a part of. Like I get to come spend time with, you know, a bunch of people in recovery, like put this ordeal together, see it all the way through.
Yeah.
Like, because when you were using, how often would you see something from start to finish?
Right.
Like I never could stay committed to something long enough to, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to see the final outcome and be proud of it. Like that didn't happen very often for me.
That sense of accomplishment, never.
Yeah.
Never.
So that's something I love about like getting that you guys do that gets the recovery community involved is they get to show up and put something together and be on this committee and be accountable and then see it through and be proud of what they did. You know, so I love Recovery Day.
Well, I'm glad you brought it
too.
up because I think it really is kind of this, you know, it's like, you know, why and what is Recovery Day? Well, you know, and USARA, I think, you know, truly, you know, how we see it is that it's everybody's. It's anybody who wants to feel connected, right? It's not territorial. It's not exclusive. It's inclusive. It's absolutely meant to be inclusive. And so that's what we wanted, you know, Pride to be, you know, our participation in Pride, which is a party, oftentimes, you know, drinking party too for many people. But we want to bring the sober component to it, the part that recovery people want to enjoy that, and also support, a community that is discriminated against, that has now risen out of, this joy and celebration, as well as advocating for themselves, the LGBTQ community. So it's really a great fit for us, and of course, Pride is one of those days where you get to dress up and you get to be silly and outrageous, which is not always the social norm, just in our everyday lives. And it is a celebration of a movement that happened to help free people from discrimination and stigma. Yeah. So I think that really fits well. And I think that's really what Recovery Day is about. The recovery movement is this celebration. We do a walk. So we've done a 5K and we've gone to a walk. We may go back to a 5K, but this year we're chosen by Faces and Voices of Recovery to be the national hub during Recovery Month, the month of September event in Salt Lake City, which is very exciting, right?
It's so exciting.
They pick a hub every year. We went to Dallas last year. We took some advocates and some of the recovery delegates that went there, and then Faces and Voices contacted USARA and said we would like to make USARA, Salt Lake City, the hub event. And so we're working on that now, where we've got our first committee meeting, and it gets a little more complicated because it's not so straightforward. You get people from all over who get to participate and plan this event. USARA has the responsibility of liability insurance, those types of things, but it is inclusive, where lots of people in the recovery community get to bring about what their wish is, or what they're interested in doing for that event on that day. Awesome. I remember one time saying this is a very chaotic planning process, yet it comes together to the point where, like you said, it's one of your favorite events.
I love it.
Yeah. I love it too.
It
and
wouldn't exist without everybody.
Part of. Yeah. Again, coming back to that sense of being part of. And I for one love it, and I've loved the last several years and watching it grow.
Right.
Because it's just growing massively, which I think is really beautiful to watch, because that does absolutely speak to the movement and the momentum that we are making in and changing that perception and that stigma and that discrimination. Right. There's still definitely work to be done. Yeah. But just seeing that forward movement is amazing. So Mary Jo, if someone wants to get involved in that, how would they go about getting involved?
Go to the website, and then you can, there's a link on the website for Recovery Day. Okay.
USARA's website?
USARA's website. Okay. So that's www.myusara.com. And MyUSARA is MYUSARA. Okay. And the thing also to know is that, Recovery Day doesn't happen just in Salt Lake City. Yeah. We've had several throughout the state for many years now. People are celebrating. So Ogden and Davis County joined to have their own event. Provo has its event. St. George has its event. There's been recovery celebration in Park City, Vernal, Price, Moab, Tooele. So everybody has their own kind of community event and celebration during that month. It's a complicated month because, lots going on.
Trying to juggle all of the different
counties. We're hoping this year that we get to celebrate in Salt Lake City for this national event, yet the local communities will likely still have their own event, because I do think recovery happens locally. Yeah. It happens in your community, where your families are, where your peers are. And so that's really key. Yeah. The fact that we'll have this national event and national focus this year might be uniquely different, and hopefully that we have everybody come from all over the state, because we will have some other people that will come from other states to this hub event. So that's why it'll be a little bit different this year. But again, we'll have the walk, we'll have the celebration. We hope to have some really wonderful entertainment, but really what it's about us connecting, seeing each other. I'm thrilled to get to see all of us, share not just recovery, but also the programs. There's a lot of treatment programs that participate in that. You'll see FTR, out in front. When we had the 5K, getting to, they've trained all year, addict to athlete, trained all year to do, do this event. So it's exciting. It's really where you see the community come together in all kinds of celebration and seeing these milestones every year. It's really become this kind of iconic event in our community that's happened, bringing us all together, and then of course we all do our own things, throughout the year. Yeah. So it's pretty fantastic. I mean, how much has recovery grown in so many ways, and
so much,
and so much more acceptance about how we recover. And we need to have it that way.
We do. What? Couple more points that I am curious on, and would love to get your perspective on is like current legislative action. What is changing in policies that's going to affect the community?
Well, let's see. So over the last, I would say, half a dozen years, we've been able to affect a lot with criminal justice. Criminal justice. I would say in the state of Utah for sure, being able to have not somebody immediately incarcerated because they have a possession of a drug, or have had a positive drug screen if they're on probation. Again, we're starting to really look at, what happened with recidivism is we have less crime in the state of Utah, yet more people in prison and jail. And when they did the research, the legislative process and council through the Utah Substance Use and Advisory Council, which is now integrated with mental health, did the research and found out the fact that our incarceration is not solving the problem of addiction. Right. Locking people up but not having treatment, and especially when they come out, where do they go? Healthcare reform was a big part of that. Didn't happen in the state of Utah. Hugely disappointing.
Very.
So a lot of what legislation, is about is of course bills, and different policies that might help be the catalyst for change. And naloxone, the opiate rescue drug, profoundly impactful on our community. Absolutely. Profoundly, organizations like UtahNaloxone.org and the Utah State Health Department and the Division of Substance Use and Mental Health Services, all these partners working together to make sure that we get naloxone out there. Now we have law enforcement and the sheriff departments, and everybody in every community now knows that there's a rescue drug. For somebody who may be addicted to an opiate. But it isn't just for addiction. It's anybody who has a prescribed opiate, because people overdose when they're not addicted, accidentally, because opiates are such a powerful drug. But now the awareness also is talking about earlier intervention and prevention in the medical community. I absolutely know that people in addiction recovery are educating their medical providers about their risks, which actually I think they know more about their risks than medical providers, or at least they're willing to talk about them. And so we're teaching, I think, the medical profession. I think there's many people in the medical profession who are no longer able to avoid the fact that, they're going to be serving people who have the risk of addiction or are in recovery from addiction. Instead of discriminating against them, they need to help them. So back to legislation this year, couple laws were passed that there needs to be a limitation on first-time prescriptions of an opiate. People need an opiate medication for severe pain, right? Not just a little pain. If you have a tooth
not
pulled,
just a fingernail,
if you have a tooth pulled, you don't likely
hangnail.
need an opiate.
Right.
Now, that's for me personally. I'm going to say that. That's a qualifier. Might not be that way for somebody else, but pretty typically we need to start addressing it from a non-opiate prescribing culture, right, from the medical and health industry, that really, what are some other things that you can do? Recently I have a friend who had shoulder surgery, and he doesn't even remember the physician telling him that he could stop using his oxycodone at one point and could start using ibuprofen. And we talked about it. He was 10 days out, and I said, well, why don't you try the ibuprofen?
Right.
And he's off his opiates and now the ibuprofen. This happens to be a person in 30 years recovery. But, he's not conscious of the, that culture, because he hasn't ever had to have an opiate. But we talked about it, and see, that's what's important now with legislation happening. We're making these laws, but I also think sometimes they aren't as successful as like naloxone.
Right.
We did some expungement work. We have a lot of work to do on expungement. We have people with horrible criminal records who've been arrested time and time again for possession of a substance or violation of probation because they've used again. They have these criminal records that create barriers for them getting jobs and homes. We need to do a lot more on that front.
Yeah.
So that's important. Health, like I said, health care. Providing treatment on demand.
Yeah.
You need insurance to get some form of treatment because treatment providers have to be paid for the services they provide. But if you don't have health care insurance, it's going to be difficult for you to get it. So we really have to create that. The Affordable Care Act had given us some hope to kind of go in that direction. We know that that's not, we're at this place where that's being, evaluated. We don't.
Yeah.
They've actually not included things like parity, which is the Mental Health Addiction and Equity Act, which says that treatment for addiction needs to be provided to a person just like treatment for heart disease or diabetes or cancer would be given. Yet there's still this discrimination or stigma that, behavioral health, addiction, mental illness, somebody who's at risk for suicide. Yeah, those might be options.
Yeah, those are optional care.
Optional care. Those are optional. Okay. That may be something we offer in our plan or we don't.
Right.
We can't afford that here in the United States.
No.
We have to offer that as a primary care. And we really need to provide it for everybody because I believe, and I'm sure that the more we have people with health care, they intervene at an earlier stage.
Agreed. Before
they get in trouble. Or once they are in trouble, we help them with where they're at.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things about legislation, which is, here's what I would say. I would say, find out what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
You can call USARA. We can help you get connected to maybe some legislation that's happening, or maybe you start talking about legislation. Most of it comes out of somebody's interest to say, I want to change something.
Yeah.
That's how we do it. So, of course, we have the rally every February.
Yep.
Where people and their voices get to come and people get to talk to legislators. And I will say that the Utah legislature has risen to the occasion of really being aware of addiction and recovery being very much a part of our community. So we've been well supported, but we have a long way to go. We really do. We really do. Healthcare. Parity.
Yep. Number one.
Expungement.
Yep. Agreed.
Not locking people up.
Well, not criminalizing. The disease.
Thank you very much.
Well said. It's devastating. Yeah. I think not just on a personal level, but on a community level.
Absolutely.
Even, financially, just on so many different levels.
Exactly.
So thank you, to say the least, for your dedication, and all of those who advocate up there on the hill. Yeah. And
there's a lot now, which is really great,
a lot,
right?
Which
there's
is another aspect that has grown so much, which is beautiful to see. But I personally also want to say, I'm bringing this up because I feel strongly that it is us in recovery. It is our responsibility to advocate not only for ourselves but our communities and those that are affected. Because
you're awesome. Yay, she's a recovery advocate.
Because I feel strongly, whatever affects one of us affects all of us. Right. In so many different aspects. And the threat of losing healthcare is very real and very prominent. Right. And it's not okay.
Yeah, it's not okay. And it's not okay that we go back to the war on drugs.
Exactly.
Because we go back to the war on people who are drug addicted and alcohol addicted. And that, it just hasn't worked. And we know it hasn't worked.
And we know it doesn't work. And we know that it does nothing but criminalize and dehumanize those of us who know very real that it is and we even know scientifically now and medically now, it is absolutely a disease. And it's, no different than treating a heart condition or any other medical need.
Right.
And so I thank you again to you personally and USARA for the forward movement that we are making. And to listeners out there, and it's we get to advocate for ourselves, and we get
exactly
to
it.
it's it's unfortunate, I think, that that discrimination still exists, but it's also to me very empowering that we get to fight for the changes that need to be made.
That's right. We challenge the stigma.
On the systemic,
we challenge the barriers.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So
we talk about it. We bring it up.
Yep.
And people may not be what they want to hear, but we get to. And we do it appropriately, right? We're not.
Agree.
We do it appropriately and respectfully. And
I was just going to ask, how has because I feel like today, like, you mentioned, like, oh, I'm in recovery, or the topic of addiction comes up. Most of the time people say, oh, I have a sister, or I have a mom, or, my brother struggled with this, or I have a friend that died of an overdose. I think it has touched most lives today, right?
Exactly right.
So how has that changed over time? Was it much more of a hush-hush back when you were getting sober?
Yeah, 30 years ago, I think, I'm looking, I had no idea that I was, chemically addicted, we call it now a substance use disorder. But what we, especially in the treatment industry, it used to be you go to your treatment, you have your alumni, and you have that little silo, and it's like, families keep their fingers crossed, and, we hopefully you do okay. We used to treat it as an acute problem. It's not, it's a condition.
Yep.
And so we can arrest that condition with lots of different interventions, from medication, even an opiate replacement, which is actually science-based. It's hard for people to identify that as a path of recovery, but it is.
Yeah.
And I have to say that it could be something like that blocks the craving for opiates. So education is really important. So I think we have to start to make sure that education's happening. So as you asked, Lacey, the conversation is very much a community conversation now. That has changed, and that's really important for us to talk about, because it is an epidemic addiction. Whether it's alcohol, opiates, methamphetamine, prescription opiates, illicit opiates, heroin and prescribed oxycodone, no difference. Nope. Has the same effect on the brain. We've got to have these conversations, and especially the losses. And what we know now, it's like, I don't have to, what I'll hear families that say is, I'm not ashamed, grief-stricken.
Yeah.
But it used to be, if you had somebody, a loved one that died of an overdose, you were ashamed to talk about it. It's like, well, what kind of family did he come from?
Right.
And it's not that way. It's something that's affecting us all. So the conversation has really changed.
Right.
It's really, and I'm so grateful for that part.
Me too.
Yeah.
And even, even you see that more and more, like, you see in like the obituaries, for example, like young kids, and you always kind of like wonder, but I'm starting to see more and more people like voice, like they lost their battle with addiction. And, I appreciate that it's coming to light more, because it is an epidemic, and it's a serious issue.
And and the more we bring a voice to it, the more we protect ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to really protect ourselves. I've said for a long time, and I think this is happening, is that when somebody's admitted to a substance use treatment program, their family needs to be given an naloxone kit, and they also need to be informed right up front, because we do know about leaving programs against medical or program advice.
Yep.
Equip that person with a prevention of overdose right when they get there, or the list of where they could go for supports if for some reason their agitation is heightened and they cannot stay in the program that they're in. So especially families really need to be educated. Families need to know how to deal with the impact of addiction on their lives, not necessarily just how to deal with the individual, but how to deal with the impact of addiction on your lives.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. So. Well, I think we could keep going on and on and on, but maybe to be continued. Yes. So, unless, do you have any other questions, Lacey?
Just real quick, I think before we close up, what maybe USARA, what do you guys offer? How do you get involved?
Okay. So
what services do you offer, I guess?
Sure. So it's interesting because, we developed as an organization based on kind of the input of the community and the peers and the staff that work there. So what we have, Recovery Community Organization is really to have this advocacy to celebrate recovery, like Recovery Day, doing legislative pieces. And also there's support services. We call them recovery support services, which is actually starting to evolve throughout the state. Many different treatment programs will have a continuum of services, which is, treatment, there's detoxification, there's primary treatment services, which could be residential, it could be intensive outpatient, it could be a day treatment. But on the continuum of services, there's recovery support services, which what we identify are peers in recovery, who are individuals with their own lived experience, who are able to provide support to an individual who has been struggling with addiction. It also could mean it's a family member who has had an experience of having a loved one with addiction. So we believe that recovery support can be given to somebody before, during, and after, and long term. Engagement. So at USARA specifically, we have now, and we've had it since FTR started to come in 2011, is a recovery community center where you have many different types of recovery meetings. We know there's an abundance of 12-step meetings in the community and helping people identify where they're located and how they can get to them if they're not sure. That's really important. At the Recovery Center, we have things like Double Trouble, which is a meeting that's for people with addiction and dealing with mental illness or mental health disorder. We have another one we call Recovery Leadership Initiative, where peers who are wanting to become more involved in advocating for themselves and being of service or advocating for others can be involved in that, as well as learning skills about how to deal with trying to get back into a work environment. How do you write a resume? We do individual recovery coaching, so we work with individuals, helping them identify what are your goals. What are your priorities for recovery? What are those initial things you want or you need to take care of in order to sustain your health and well-being, and what are some of the things you want to do? So we do that individual recovery coaching, and then we also do a family support meetings, in which we have one in Davis County at the Red Barn Farm, and we also have two at USARA in Salt Lake County. We're trying to facilitate these family support meetings throughout the state. We use a model called CRAFT, Community Reinforcement and Family Training. And what it really does is provide a platform for family members to support themselves as they've been impacted by addiction. And what we know is that if they support themselves and they get some education and a way to communicate with a loved one who has been addicted or is addicted, it helps the family have the dialogue like you talked about. We get to talk about it, and it's not so shame-based or stigmatized. And it also comes from a place of compassion rather than ultimatums or compliance or threats. So those types of things. So again, we have recovery coaching for the individual. We have family support for the family members. We have a family night that we do at the Recovery Center, which actually is parents bring their little kids and watch movies and play games. So really creating more of a social environment. We actually are having a barbecue this Friday at one of the fields where sober softball is occurring.
Awesome.
So kind of bringing something to the community. We go participate in in things that FDR might have a service project of feeding the homeless.
You guys just had an Easter egg hunt.
We had an Easter egg hunt.
All the little kids.
Right. Exactly. So doing those kind of events, and I have to tell you, I didn't have anything to do with that Easter egg hunt. So that's it. It's a community. It's volunteers. It's people putting that together, saying, "Hey, we have kids. We want to. We want to have an Easter egg hunt." And it was all these different programs, and people in recovery brought their children to this Easter egg hunt. I was out of town, but it was just this fabulous event.
That's cool.
So it's those kinds of things that USARA does. So it's created by the community in a lot of ways in what we do. And we do have funding that some of it is, we're about 2/3 government funded. So we really do have some things that we have to provide to whatever proposal and grant that we've responded to. So, but out of that, I believe we have lots of opportunity to support people with different types of funding streams that we have, but also as a collective.
Yeah.
Right. Well, because the grant may say, like, this needs to go back into the community this way, but you can do it anyway.
How we create it, right. And it really is mostly, I think, what USARA has been able to do, and also with some of the grant money that we've received, is really help individuals and family members develop this system of support that isn't identified by a mandate or compliance. It really is created and supported based on where they're at and what they want for themselves, and sharing this common lived experience. But really supporting people, especially when they're critically trying to get better. Yeah. So, I would say at the Recovery Center, it really is this. It's like a senior center, but it's for people who have had addiction and recovery. And so to come down and literally most of what we do is we have conversations with each other. We learn a lot from our community. Rather than come find out what we do, come share with us what you're doing, and we can tell you about some of the things we're doing, but perhaps what you're looking for, we might be able to connect you to, or maybe create it.
Yeah. Well, and support, like FTR, to support those individual sparks and passions and individual people, but it very, very much comes from that grassroots level. By the people and from the people and just the community. I think USARA offers so much and does so much in so many different events and all of that. I definitely encourage, anyone interested, check out the website. Yeah. Because it's just, it's cool to watch also and to check out. So.
Yeah, or if you have an idea to start something, go see Mary Jo.
Yeah,
she'll help you
exactly.
Start it.
Yeah, that's I'm a good hey, I have an idea, and usually people scatter. Oh, really? That means we're going to do something else. But really, I think people in recovery have so many wonderful ideas. We're seeing all different kinds of people start their own businesses. Yeah. And employing people in recovery to get it going, whether it's treatment or a recovery residence or a nutrition. Nutrition-based organization providing a service. Really some cool things that are happening.
And the creativity and the creativity is awesome.
I love living here. Boy, I tell you, we've got, Utah's just this incredible place, and the people here are incredible, and I think the recovery community is really thriving. And
it is.
And the more visible we are, the people who are in trouble or the families that are struggling can come to us and they say, I need some help. Yep. That's really what it's about. Right?
It is.
Then we create the path for someone to get the help and support that they need because it's readily accessible. And really more in the recovery community sometimes than we have the funding for in a structured arena. Yeah. So, I think all of us are doing a lot of really wonderful things to change this podcast, getting this out there to people, helping them see different ways that they can do this. We've talked for a long time, so I hope your editor is able to,
Neil is the man.
He is. Thank you, Neil. But at the same time, there's so much meat, and I don't want to cut any of it out, but I'm sure for time's sake, we'll probably have to. Yes. So I guess we'll wrap up there, ladies. Again, thank you both for your time. And Mary Jo, pleasure. Absolutely. I can't tell you enough how grateful we are to just share this experience with you. So again, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, listening, watching. Again, if you're interested, if you like any of this, subscribe. We're on Google Play, iTunes. List goes on and on. So definitely subscribe. And I'm sure this will be to be continued because this conversation could keep going and going. So for our listeners out there also, feel free to carry on the conversation and the message of recovery because it needs to go out there. So
yes. Awesome. And thank you, Alisa, for being such a wonderful host.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Mary Jo.
My privilege.
Thank you, Alisa, very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Honor.
Okay.
And
Bye.
that's a wrap.
Bye.
Bye.